We've got a very special guest that we'll be talking to very shortly, and he'll be talking about a topic that we've been talking about quite a bit on this network, that being AI and all along those lines and its impact on our kids, or maybe even not the kind of impact that we think it's having and everything like that. But first, let me get you to some of the world events, and then I'll bring in my very special guest. We'll also see if any of our panelists join us today, our regular panelists, and see what they've got to say about things as well. Apparently, the Pope slept peacefully, got up, and had breakfast after a diagnosis of pneumonia. So, the Vatican authorities say the Pope now has pneumonia in both lungs. And there are some folks that are worried about that. And we'll see how worrying that is for Pope Francis and all along those lines. And experts give up hope for 157 false killer whales stranded on a beach in Australia's area of tsunami and everything. So prospects grim for the 157 false killer whales stranded in tsunami, the largest in 50 years. So that's something that folks are talking about, and it looks like they might be expected to be euthanized after an unsuccessful rescue attempt and all in that world. And Brazil charges former President Jair Bolsonaro over alleged coup plot. So, charged with a coup plot, Bolsonaro seeks a lifeline from Brazil lawmakers. So, Brazil has charged Bolsonaro with attempting a coup. So, that's something else we're seeing in the news as well. And alarmed by Trump's Gaza plan, Arab leaders are brainstorming on their own. So Trump backs in Egypt's plan for Gaza after meeting with Jordan's king, according to sources in that area. And Egypt is developing a Gaza reconstruction plan to counter Trump's takeover. So that's something that we're seeing, as well as Gaza's Arab plan may involve up to $20 billion in regional contributions, according to what some sources are saying. And the UAE president tells the US's Rubio that UAE rejects displacement of Palestinians from their own land. So U.S. top diplomat Rubio visited UAE after landmark talks with Russia over the Ukraine war. So that's something that's going on as well. So definitely it looks like Rubio is trying to find some peaceful solutions to some of these things that are taking place. And nearly 300 deportees from the U.S. are held in a Panama hotel. So that's being reported as well. So under Trump's mass deportation plans, some migrations are being sent to Panama. So U.S. deports nearly 120 Asian migrants of different nationalities to Panama. And as Panama says many migrants deported from the U.S. agreed to be returned to their home country. So that's something else that people are talking about as well. And we talked about this yesterday. A couple on the around the world trip has been charged as spies in Iran. So British couple on world motorcycle tour is detained in Iran. So that's something that is on the international front as well. And Hamas says it will return the bodies of 4 hostages, including Bibi's family. So Bibi's children, symbols of hostage crisis, to come home dead, according to Hamas reports and everything like that. So senior Hamas official, terror group prepared to free all hostages in single swap in phase 2 of the deal. So definitely looks like that is going on as well. And Dominican Republic officials crammed thousands of inmates facing no charges into overcrowded prisons. So it looks like they're having a prison dilemma there in the Dominican Republic. And European leaders are trying to recalibrate after Trump sides with Russia on Ukraine. And sidelined by Trump, Macron tries to rally Europe on Ukraine, but divisions run deep. So France is to convene a second meeting on Ukraine on Wednesday. So that would be on today. So we'll see how this all plays out as well. And Palestinian families flee West Bank homes in droves as Israel confronts militants. So destruction and displacement continue as Israel's Janine Reid enters its second month. So definitely that is something else going on in the Middle East. So there's all these conflicts around the world. And Germany's far-right AFD is shut out from power for now, but waiting in the wings. So the rise of the far right, global trade, and Ukraine's future, that's some people are saying that the German elections definitely matter and everything like that. So we'll definitely see how those elections play out. And there are a number of other elections that are taking place in the year 2025 around the world. So definitely that is something that we're seeing as well. And the U.S. condemns dangerous maneuvers by the Chinese Navy in South China Sea. U.S. calls out dangerous Chinese helicopter maneuvers as tensions rise over the South Chinese Sea. And Chinese military helicopters fly within 10 feet of the plane, according to what a video shows, and all along those lines. So also residents are saying that a Rwandan-backed rebels are advancing on a third city in eastern Congo. So definitely, like I said, there are conflicts throughout the world in the various continents and all along those lines. Let me get to some United States news, and then I'll bring in a special guest that we've got and everything. We'll be talking about AI and its impact on our kids and all along those lines. But it looks like Trump has given another blow to Ukraine and a new boost to Putin. So that's something that's being reported according to CNN and other news sources as well. And Elon Musk apparently is looking beyond Washington toward Wisconsin. So group tied to Elon Musk investing in Wisconsin ahead of a Supreme Court race. So it looks like Brad Schummel says he's not for sale after Elon Musk group drops 1.5 million in his race. So it looks like he's trying to have some impact on that part of the world as well. And Kansas legislators override governor's veto of legislation that targets trans kids. So that's something that we're seeing in terms of trans news. And the Trump administration has halted support for representing unoccupied children in some of these deportation cases. So lawyers helping migrant children facing deportation ordered by Trump administration to stop all work. So that's something else that is going on as well. And Trump has signed a new order to vastly expand his presidential powers. So President Trump is testing the waters with government agency control, according to some market experts and all along those lines. And by the way, it hasn't hit yet. They were saying that it was going to be at 7 a.m., but they are saying that heavy snow will hit Virginia, Maryland, and the Carolinas, where I am, as the storms track east. I think they're saying that we might get ours starting at around noon and all along those lines. So we'll definitely be seeing how this plays out as well. So like I said, there's a lot going on in the world, including Lori Chavez DeRimmer, Trump's Labor Department pick, to face questions from the Senate. So pro-union Trump nominee faces Senate grilling is at least one Republican vows to oppose her. So it definitely looks like there might be some pushback, but so far all the nominees that he has put in have been confirmed, except for Matt Gaetz and everything along those lines. So definitely there's a lot going on in the world, including Trump cuts threaten a generation of scientists as many are weighing leaving the U.S. So Trump's NIH budget cuts threaten the entire field of research, stirring the panic among some scientists and all along those lines. And last but not least, Oregon U.S. Attorney Natalie Wright removed from job by the Trump administration. So definitely it looks like there's a lot going on, including some of these layoffs and everything and what will take place with these layoffs and all in that space. But like I said, I've got a very special guest that's been involved in the AI space and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring in my special guest. I've also got a guest from Canada. Of course, we've got our regular commentator, Steve Rouse. So before I get to Mark Prince and Charles, because we do have a guest on.
I'm going to stay for, thank you so much. I want to stay for a few minutes for the guests. I'm shuffling around travel schedules because I'm trying to get to DC tomorrow, but it looks like I called. They said it should be cleared out by tomorrow, so I'm hoping I can get out here. My flight's at 11, so waiting to see how I can get there. But yeah, real quickly, I mean, all eyes are on Ukraine and what's going on. I feel really bad for the people of Ukraine. The anniversary of the invasion of the 24th. There was some ICE deportations here in Durham and Cary affecting the Indian community, which is interesting, Mark. We'll talk about that next week when I'm back from Washington. And you know, it just I may do a show from DC if it's not too cold from the Capitol. Well, I'll walk over from my hotel. But it's been a really crazy time, and I think Trumponomics and Trump 2.0, he's delivered and executed. And I'm going to hand it over to the AI experts. I mean, I've written a number of articles on AI in terms of its impact on jobs and how we have to invest in training people for the new jobs, the new economy. The opportunity of AI to leverage productivity for local governments. We're in Morse, we're bringing in an AI chatbot called Morse the Cricket, which is kind of cute. And we've got a lot of really, really good things going on. But I think there is a concern about what I'm hearing from, and I know the topic is about kids, is people not being able to think on their own and you know, kind of depending on the AI too much, and you know, writing homework assignments and papers in AI, and you know, not a lot of really rules and regulations. So, you know, I just think it's something that we have to think about. So I'm going to hand it over. I'm going to stay for a few minutes. I got to head out, but I'll hopefully start coming back, you know, in the year after I become a commissioner nominee from the Democrats have got a tough race ahead. So, but thank
Appreciate
you
it
so
and
much.
everything. So we're going to bring in Mark Prinsky, who spells his name the same way that I spell mine and everything. And he's written a number of books. He's coming at us from Palo Alto, California, and everything like this. But he actually makes the argument that this notion that we should be concerned that our kids have easy access to this powerful resource is actually the opposite is true and everything. And I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'll let him make his own arguments and everything like that. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts about artificial intelligence and cell phones, because I know a number of people are glad to give their young people, I don't have any young people of my own, I do have two nephews, their cell phone and cell phone access and everything. But I just wanted your take on this notion of AI being a good tool that can definitely help our kids' educations and all along those lines, and why you decided to write this book, Third Millennium Kids.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. I am very positive and optimistic and hopeful about our young people. And I think that what's so interesting is that we're moving into a very new time. And it's almost an evolution. It's almost a step like when we got speech or when we got writing. And it is going to extend human powers enormously. The trouble is, we're at the very beginning and we don't know how to use these things. It's as if we got a new tail or some gruesome new antennas and we don't quite know what they do. We know what people did in the past. So we think if we just continue that and we get our kids to do the same thing, they'll be better. But that's not true. They're going to live in such a different environment that it's really important that they start figuring out how these new enhancements to their person, to all of our persons, about connections and about compute power and about artificial intelligence, which I call added intelligence, how that's going to play out in the future. And that really depends on all of us, how we approach it and how we look at it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I know that you came up with the term digital natives, and all along those lines, a lot of times people are hearing that term and don't know who coined the term, but it seems like that you actually are the one that coined that term. So what does that mean to you and everything? And how did you come up with this term of digital natives? I've heard other people use it as well, but I did not know that I was going to have the founder or the person that coined that term. So how did that come about that you actually came up with that term?
Well, that's the probably the lasting thing in my life. I'm in the Oxford English Dictionary for having done that. But it came out of the fact that I observed the young people around me, particularly in the company that I was running at the time, that they did things very differently than I did. And I grew up at a time when I needed information, I called the person that I knew who I thought would know the answer. They posted it online. They got more answers. They got it more quickly. And so then that generalized into what they could do given that they were living in a digital world and they knew they were living in a digital world that we couldn't do or that I didn't do. So that they were native speakers of this new language. And what's interesting about that took 25 years. Literally, that was around the turn of the millennium that term got coined. It took a long time. And I think something similar is going to happen with AI, that we are now just seeing, because it's only about 2 years old, the kids being born into the generation that had generative AI. And so nobody really knows how to use this well. Everybody's concerned about it. Everybody thinks that it is frightening in many ways. But the analogy that just popped into my mind as you were talking is clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, humans went around naked, right? And then we invented clothing and we said, oh, this is so nice. It keeps us warmer. It's easier. And I'm sure there were people back then who said, no, why should you wear clothing when the naked human is what God created or what the gods at that time created? So each one of these enhancements that comes, and whether it's clothing or speech or writing or print or science or anything else, there's a lot of people who say, "Ooh, that makes people different," and that is bad because people like themselves. They think, oh, we're so good. Look at us. Look at what we can do. But we keep evolving and we keep being enhanced. And now we're in a period of enormous enhancement. And I think it's going to come out for the best. And I think the kids are very lucky to be born in this time.
Yeah, along those same lines and everything, I'll bring in some of my other panelists as well because they may have some questions for you also. But what do you say to those folks? Because you actually mentioned it even in your mailer and everything, this notion that some people are saying that AI is making us lazy. We've heard a number of people even during this, the pandemic that we came out of, that were concerned that AI was going to start taking jobs and everything. And one of the jobs that I work for is a testing company, not just Pod TV, but also a testing company. And there are some people that feel that AI makes it easier for the students to cheat and all along those lines. So what do you say to those critics that are highlighting the negative aspects of AI?
I say we have to change our objectives because we are now more powerful people. If we have the students, the young people realize this from day one. When ChatGPT came out, they started using it immediately because it was so useful to humans because we had this homework that had to get done and it could do it. And so rather than getting lazy, I think what we have to do is figure out what each young person is really enthusiastic about, what they love to do. The motto of this book is hell yes, low stress, which is the absolute opposite of what we do to kids. Right now, we say, don't worry, you do what we tell you to do. You go to school and you learn what I call the mess: math, English, science, social studies. You do that, and that's going to get you where we think you want to go. Well, it did in the past, but it's not going to do it tomorrow. And so we have to figure out new ways that work for the future environment, that work for an environment where there is this added intelligence, that work for the kids. And that means we want enthusiastic kids, much more than we have today in schools. And we want people who can follow what they want to do in terms of helping people, in terms of solving problems or fixing problems, in terms of realizing dreams. And we're so much more powerful to get there but we have to abandon some things from the past to do so.
Really quickly, I know I've got Jacoby, who is a e-games expert, and also Rick Rosner, who is definitely one of the world's most intelligent people and a member of Mensa and all along those lines and everything. We've also got Charles Bell coming in from Canada, who has definitely been covering that crash and everything like that. But one of the reasons that the network was founded by Kim and Nick was this notion that education is not teaching as much as it should be teaching, and that we're not educating kids about a number of things, including fiscal literacy, which they are big on, and everything like that. So I just wondered, in your research, what is your take on how the education system of the United States is doing compared to the rest of the world, whether it's on AI or whether it's just in education in general?
I think the whole world is struggling. And so the U.S. is one of the places that's struggling. I think my sense is that the U.S. is in many ways less open to the future and more tied to the past and what I just called the mess: math, English, science, social studies, than other places are. I see more experimentation outside. I'm working with a school in Pakistan that's an all AI school that really is helping kids learn to create and learn to do things. And so I see a hand in the air.
Yes.
I will be
quiet. We're the beneficiary. The U.S. is the beneficiary as a tech leader of the push we had for math and science after Sputnik through the 60s and 70s. And now we have one major political party who just wants to do away with the Department of Education. So, yeah, we are hobbling along with one dead leg.
I'm a Sputnik kid. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I was born in the Sputnik era. I was pushed into math and science. And math and science is good, and it's useful, and it's helpful for some things. And there are people who love it and do very well in it. But it's not necessarily for everyone.
But we can't have people trying to sabotage our education system or privatize it. And go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would say that what we really need is change. We really need a radical change, and that means right now the aim of education is learning in advance. It's learning in advance a particular curriculum, and then we test people and we see how much they learned, and then we give them credit. And that's not what it takes to prepare people for the future. I think we need to move to accomplishment and to having impact, which young people can do now in ways that they never ever could do before. So by doing that, each person learns what they need to accomplish what they're trying to do, as opposed to everybody learning the same thing. And I think that when that's what's the system that's going to evolve. We don't know exactly what it is, but I see pieces of it coming all over the world. And what you get is happy, enthusiastic kids who are doing what they are passionate about, what they are interested in, and also making a positive impact on
One
the
more
world.
quick thing, then I'll shut up. Yeah, school has to be more interesting. 100 years ago, school was the most interesting part of a kid's day. Now it's maybe the least interesting because they take away your devices. Everybody needs to be all deviced up, but in a way that reinforces learning.
And that's what I was going to ask you, Mr. Prince, because
More.
you actually have mentioned before in some of your research the use of the smartphone. And I do know that there are schools that literally take the smartphone away and are not big fans of the smartphone in the class, even though I know that a lot of times the smartphone is what is needed to communicate with the kids. I don't know that my nephews would be able to get in touch with my brother, their dad, or some of the other family members, including our dad, their granddad, if it wasn't for those smartphones that they have and everything. So how important is the smartphone, or is it something that we're overly dependent on?
I think it's a new part of us. I think it's a new part that suddenly emerged, and it's just a vehicle for particular things. It's the vehicle for communication. It's the vehicle for connection. It's the vehicle for accessing compute power. And it's the vehicle for accessing AI. And that vehicle will change over time. It will probably be built into our bodies at some point. But the interesting thing is that we say, and you just said, Rick, that we want to use these things for learning. Well, I don't think that what young people need is just to learn. I think they need to learn in service of doing something that helps the world and that they are enthusiastic about. And the problem is that if we all look at this stuff for the kinds of learning that we did in the past, the phones don't help. They get in the way. That's why teachers want to put them in yonder pouches. But if we were doing different things, if we said, holy God, we are in a time when we have capabilities, and our young people have capabilities that we never dreamed of having before, that they can connect with everybody in the world, that they have a supercomputer in their pocket, that they can ask AI for all sorts of help in doing various things. These things didn't exist in the past, and to throw them away, to say, oh no, we just can't have those things, we just have to do what we did in the past, I think is really backwards. I call it giving kids a lobotomy. Taking away their phones is giving them a lobotomy.
So I said I was going to shut up. I lied. So 10 years ago, my brother and I were pitching a near future high school TV show where one of the kids is awkward and he's got an AI girlfriend who's humanizing him, who's teaching him how to, in return for minor sexual favors, how to deal with women. And there are at least 100 companies right now who will set you up with an AI girlfriend, and mostly for sexual gratification. But there's technology there, social technology. I could have used one when I was in high school and was socially hopeless.
Just really quickly along those same lines, because I know one of the things that you talk about, Mr. Prince King, I think is even in one of your other books, Empowered and Everything, is this notion, which kind of what Rick is alluding to, that maybe we're not teaching our kids enough about the emotional skills of love, empathy, gratitude, and optimism. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, because maybe that's something that we are not letting our kids learn enough about in this day and age. I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
100%. We are going through the roof intellectually. We can do things now. Any young person can do things now, write a book, create things that we couldn't do before. But emotionally, we're not moving forward as quickly. And we've always had two sides of our emotions. We've always had the love, empathy, gratitude, optimism. I call that Lego, that is very positive. And then on the other side, we always have had greed, racism, abuse, belligerence, and bullying. And those are the things that always get in the way. And you can see that from everywhere from Homer to Shakespeare. And the issue that I see that we're going to face more and more is that as we become intellectually better and we can do many more things, we're going to be stymied by the fact that this greed and racism and abuse and belligerence and bullying keep coming back. And that's what's happening often on the cell phones, because the adults who are greedy, now suddenly we have betting and we have a lot of things that are maybe not the best things, but they make people a lot of money. And so until we can figure out how to really emphasize the love, empathy, gratitude, optimism, I'd love to see a big board, a big sign at the front of every classroom that said that, just like we used to have the letters that cursive handwriting. But that's going to be, I call it the intellectual emotional gap. And that's going to be a real problem going forward that we hopefully can address with all the new tools we have in our times.
Hey, just really quickly, and I think that Charles got a question too, and I'm sure Jacoby does as well. But what do you say? Because there are 8 billion plus people, and of those 8 billion plus people, there are about 2 billion that are kids around the world. So I don't know that we understand the power of the kid's voice and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on that, because one of your projects is the 2 billion kid project, which means that kids make up a fourth of our population and everything like that. So what is your thoughts about the power of kids?
Well, they don't know the power they have yet. Most of them are not aware of that. But the power is enormous. And take Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg, we all know, we've heard from her. She wanted and still wants, I think, to get action for climate change. And she started out in a very old-fashioned way demonstrating, and then she got more into the idea of speaking to a lot of people, which was also 20th century. And then she started organizing these strikes for Fridays for Future strikes in various places. Well, here's what she could do. Here's the power that Greta Thunberg could have now. She could reach out via the media to every single kid in the world. And a great majority of them have the phones and hear from others who have the phones. And she could say, let's go on strike permanently from school. We'll just stop going until something happens regarding climate change. And boy, would that be, if any of them did that, and I think many would, it would be incredibly disruptive. It would be incredibly disruptive to the adults, and it might produce some changes. And each young person has this enormous power. If we say to a kid, we used to say, do a survey about this in school, and you survey the 30 people in your class or the 100 or a couple hundred people in your school. Now we can say to a kid of any age, of 5 years old, do a survey, use SurveyMonkey, and come back with 1 billion or 1 million answers. We can do that. And that's the kind of power that young people now have. And that's just the very beginning of it. That's the very tip of the iceberg. When we learn, and when the young people learn that this power is now in their hands, I think we're going to start to see some real changes in the world.
Charles, you had a question? I think that I saw your hands up.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I guess it's more of a comment and question for Mark, which is, where do you see the governance piece when it comes to big tech and the way a child's mind is getting shaped by technology? I'll frame it by saying, I don't disagree with you that the tools with which children live their lives, which is screens, should be employed in an insightful way in the class context. But at the moment, we, in essence, have almost no control over what's happening in that content space. Educational institutions, civil society, all the rest of it. It's clear that there's a social code, or online behaviors we all know are dreadful. So what's your comment about that, Mark? How if you were advising the US or Canadian federal government or state level on how to regulate that space smartly, because at the end of the day, it's an accelerated space, right? It's a digital space. So it may be that government, and I know this is a long question, but it may be that government needs to also get digital so that it can match the pace of that private zone. What's your thinking about that?
I think the evolution that's going on is happening everywhere, and we're all struggling with it. So we see it in the government, and we see, okay, how can we be more efficient with technology? I don't see it as regulation as much as experimentation, and that we really need the place where we're falling down is that we're blaming the kids. We're saying, oh, look at these kids, they are lazy, or they are emotionally depressed, and we put that on the phones. We say, oh, it's the phones. But guess what? I talk to kids all the time. They don't say I'm stressed out because of my phone, except if they're being bullied. That's an exception. But they say I'm stressed out by my parents. I'm stressed out by school. I'm stressed out by societal expectations that don't make sense to me. So that what we're going to need to learn to do, and we're going to do this because we have no choice, and it's going to take probably 20 years for it to take place, we're going to wind up in a different kind of society. And the interesting thing is that Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, 50 years ago, she talked about prefigurative culture. She said it's the young people in the future, not the parents and the grandparents, who are going to determine the way the world is and the way culture is. And that we're living through that. And I think it's exciting, but it's also hurtful to the people who expect things to continue as they did in the past.
So you talked about changes that could happen. A huge change happened last year, which is the Republicans took over the bros, the young males, with a fire hose of messaging, and won over. And that is a tremendous change. Kids usually lean liberal, but they got bombarded with messaging, and they flipped the election for Trump.
I wouldn't disagree with that analysis, and I don't know that that's the complete analysis, but if we're in a time when the messaging is so important, and the way this happens and the influence is so important, then it's incumbent on all of us to figure out how to do this, and it's particularly incumbent on the young people to figure out how to do this. So I was talking with people about who are organizing a festival of hope for kids, right? They have this festival of hope. And I'm thinking, wait a second, why isn't there a channel of hope? Why isn't there something that is compelling as YouTube? Why aren't these messages that Rick, you think are important, that other people think, that I think are important, why aren't they getting out there with the equal force that as the ones that we don't like? And that's a lot of that comes back to this greed and racism and abuse that really dominates the world in too many ways.
Yeah, just really quickly and everything, because I was going to turn it to Toby, because I know one of the things he's involved with is another topic of one of your books, because the title of one of your books is Empowerment Hubs. And Jacoby is one of our regular columnists, but he's also put together an event center or a esports center that would be like an empowerment hub in my mind and everything like that. So I just wondered, could you talk a little bit about what empowerment hubs are? And then Jacoby's got a question for you as well and everything, because I'm thinking that what Jacoby has described would be an empowerment hub.
Well, I think that kids can do so much more. And I don't just that I think it. They tell me every time you talk to a young person, they say, we can do so much more than we're asked to do. We can do so much more. And so my big advice to a teacher or a parent is to look at the kid and say, surprise me. Show me what you can do. Show me what you can, what is coming and what you can do that's better than what we give you to do today. And that, create these things. So the answer of an empowerment hub is a place where young people can create things every day that impact the world. And again, those are fixing a problem they see, because all kids see problems. It's helping other people. It's realizing dreams that they may have. And that if that were the day, if that were what kids did every day for the however many hours they now spend in school, and we did it deliberately to say, do only what you're interested in, do only what you love, do only what you really want to do, we have now the methodologies to make this happen. I work with a group called Design for Change in 70 countries, and we're doing this. And we have these projects that the world around the people who are doing this changes positively. And young people are very capable of doing that. And what do? We pen them into schools. We pen them into schools. People made analogies of schools and prisons, and they're very apt in many cases.
Jacoby, you had a question?
Mine, it's a semantic thing because I call what I'm actually creating an education and workforce incubator, where it's basically giving the kids the tools and everything else. However, my issue would go back to cell phones, because the cell phones, I think there is a problem because there is a barrier of entry with cell phones. And the only way to balance that barrier now, due to financial reasons, because there are, 16% of the children in the U.S. are living in poverty. You've got 333 million across the globe that are in poverty, can't afford those cell phones. So that's a financial barrier that they'd have to overcome. So if we start to use cell phones as that teaching tool to hold on to, you have a whole swath of our young folk that are going to get left behind. In your mind, how do you balance that?
Well, I'm 100% with you in that I want to reach every kid. I want all 2 billion kids to have this stuff. But it's not that the barrier is not that they don't have the phones. You can share phones. There are villages in Africa where they have one phone for the whole village. But think about what you were just talking about. How do you do these things? When you have a question about how to get somewhere, the best way that we have now is you go to YouTube. You say, how do I do this? I want to change the electricity. I want to do this. I want to do this. We learn from YouTube, and there's lots of places to learn from. Well, everybody they don't have to have their own phone necessarily. It would be great if they did. Remember, a lot of the people who have phones, who are in the haves of the world, like me, have a lot of extra phones in their drawers that they once used and they don't use anymore. So it's not that there's not enough phones, it's that we don't distribute them properly. In Pakistan, almost every kid has a phone. So it's a really different, because the phones are much cheaper there. And we need to solve that problem that you talked about. Absolutely. There's nobody who should be left out. But the answer to not leaving kids out is to have them work together. The answer is to say, look, I don't care if there's one phone for every two people. I don't care if there's one phone for a class. What are we doing with it? How are we using the affordances of our time? We live in a world where this is what humans now have. How do we make sure everybody accesses it to do something that they want to do?
Is there a way to...
Sorry, Jacoby.
I was just going to say, is there a way to focus more on the business end? Because the issue, for example, with creating this incubator situation that I've been going on in this area, the problem that I've come across, yes, people have other phones, but we have kids in in a 30-mile separation in a group where only one has a phone and they're using their parents' phone. So is there a way to get businesses and corporations to actually use the phones that they recycle? Because, for example, you can take your old phone back to T-Mobile, Verizon, wherever, have those businesses, because I think that's where we lose focus, because right now we're putting a lot of ownership on a lot of the individuals that don't have and wanting them to group together rather than the ones that have that can spread the wealth?
Yes, is the short answer to your question. We should be doing that. And we should be, and the people who should solve this problem, in my view, are the young people. So if I were in charge, I would say to the young people, hey, we have a problem. Not everybody has the greatest cell phone service in the world. I call it aorta, always on real-time access. Let's fix this. Let's make the US, all parts of the US, let's make the whole world like South Korea or like Estonia, that where everybody has this kind of stuff. We can do this. Kids can do amazing things. They can splice cables, they can lay cables, they can connect to satellites, they can distribute phones, they can collect phones, they can even negotiate with companies. This is something that we are just denying ourselves because we think that the kids can't do anything. And maybe that was true a century ago. Maybe that was true when I grew up. We could only go to Radio Shack. Now, the power that young people have is immense. And we just haven't really figured out, like you described something great, that all these phones are coming back and they're getting refurbished and they're doing this. Why aren't they going to the people who could use them, who need them? Well, and why aren't they using them to earn money and become part of businesses? And that we really need to change the way we view the world and young people and growing up in a world of technology.
I don't disagree with you, and I wanted to jump in, if I may. And I don't know, Mark, if you're aware that there's a lot of debate about Musk's reach with SpaceX and satellites and all the rest of it. So it highlights a key question, which is whose network and whose algorithm. It's not that we don't want digital access for the underprivileged. And in Canada, where I am, that's actually quite an acute issue. We have an oligopoly that controls the cell networks here. Bell, TELUS, and Rogers, three companies.
Rogers,
and
yeah.
Our rates in Canada are approximately twice what you folks pay in the United States. And nobody talks about that up here. They don't say a child living in poverty in rural Saskatchewan cannot afford to access the digital world because of this pricing structure. So that's, to be certain, that's an issue. But I follow Musk, as I'm sure we all do. And one of his talking points lately has been who writes the algorithm. And so I think for civil society actors that are interested in a social contract that's robust and engaging children in that social contract, I think we have to ask the question, how do we design an algorithm that they feel they have some control of and that they can self-author within? There's actually a wonderful organization called Design It For Us. That's a Chicago-based youth that leads it. And it's absolutely marvelous. It's a coalition of young activists and organizations advocating for safer social media and online platforms for kids, teens, and young adults. They have a declaration of digital rights, our digital rights hashtag, Design It For Us. So here they are. They are the right to privacy, the right to safety, the right not to be experimented on, the right to agency, the right to user controls, to delete themselves from that space, the right to choice within that space, the right to a seat at the table, a voice in not just the content and streams of content, but how the system is designed, transparency, accountability, and protected from manipulation. And just speaking as a participant in the documentary film community in Canada, I was at Google and Facebook for a doc shoot 10 years ago about big data. We interviewed George Lois, the advertising executive. And in those days, no one had even heard of big data. They were just starting to talk about it. And what struck me then and remains, I think, true now is that no one's really in charge.
Yep.
Well, so there's a wonderful
doing this, like Zuckerberg, for example. He has no idea how his business runs. There's a well-meaning guy from Harvard that years ago got lucky. And I mean, he has some control, but the point I'm making is that we presume that there's a high degree of control in these systems, but there's not. It's the opposite. It's actually chaotic. So those of us that want to see better for children, we have to start by wanting to regulate that space and step away from the neoliberal messianic digital frontier thinking. And there's an interesting, forgive me, I know I'm going on at length, but there's an interesting analog in this, which is that there's two types of futurists these days. There's the post-human futurists that state that consciousness is going to become non-human at some point. And then there's the human futurists that say any future must center humanity and humanism in itself, or it's not valid and it's not worth investing in. And I think that finds no purer realization than when talking about the way kids' minds are being shaped by technology. I know that's a lot to chew on.
I look at it, and I know Rick wants to chime in. We want to go first, Rick?
Sure. There's a great Canadian named Cory Doctorow who coined the term enshittification, which is that every tech thing starts out seeming like it's going to be great. Google, Facebook, Twitter, and then as financial predation sets in, or just having a business model that means that you want to make money, they get crappier and crappier. Twitter is the worst because you've got a guy who was able to burn $35 billion to turn Twitter from a joke machine where you could go and read thousands of jokes a day from hundreds of comedians. That was my interest, into an anger and division machine.
It's interesting you should mention that, because Facebook has actually emulated that community notes model that Musk brought in. You know, his piece was, we're going to cut all of these folk back in New York and LA and elsewhere. I think it was 80% of the staff, and brought in community notes. So a self-policing system, if you will. And now Zuckerberg and Meta have emulated that. So that's quite fascinating. I guess then it becomes the question of who governs the community notes standard.
Yeah, because Mark,
chime in here if I may.
Yes.
Given that this is when you were talking, Charles, you said we have to do this for our kids, and that to me is the essence of the problem, is that adults control kids. That has been the paradigm that we have all had. We have to control them, so they'll do this, they'll come out in this way, they won't think this way, they'll do this. I think we're in a different time now. I think we're in a time where kids are so powerful, they have so many tools, they can create so many things that they can start controlling themselves. And that it's really important that we help them understand that they can do that. And so the issue, and by the way, I wanted to take a minute to welcome the Canadians as our 51st state. But never
gonna happen.
There you go. It's not going to happen. But the idea, the thing that I've really been about and centered my life on for a long time, is saying, let's pay attention and listen to this younger generation, which in many places is more than 15%, more than 50% of the population. And we ignore them in the same way that we ignored women for so many years. We took half the population out of the equation of decision making. And now we're taking another half of the population out of the decision making part. And that's the young people. And I just give them much more credit than other people do. I think that we, as adults, we've all gone in our directions, and we can fight and we can decide what we want in civil society. And we go, no, in 20 years, we're going to be dead. So,
can I ask you a question, Mark? What degree of control do you think currently exists for a child's experience of the internet that adults created in, say, the last 5 years? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much choice do you think a child has in the way that algorithm functions in their content stream curation?
Well, the biggest choice is whether they actually have the phone or not. That's the biggest one right now.
So
and
assuming that they do,
on the phone.
Sorry to interrupt, but assuming that they do, because there's lots of kids that do, right? I think that the piece about giving people access to technology is absolutely crucial, and I'm right with you there. But moving past that to the kids that are currently online 12 to 14 hours a day on their device, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much control do you think they are actually given by the current algorithms and businesses that own their digital space and their digital interactions?
I think that there's trade-offs that go in both ways.
Can I have a number?
Oh, well, they have theoretically 100%. So theoretically they can.
I give them. So you and I are very far apart on this. I give them a 3 out of 10. Currently, the algorithm, Facebook, Meta, Google, etc. They have very little control.
I go on. So here's what I would say. I'd love to have this discussion. It's a really important.
We're having it.
That's right. And so I don't see. I mean, there are kids. I go on to Shorts, which I happen to like a lot, or I go onto TikTok. I learn a lot, and guess what? It's easy to get sucked in and take more time because it's actually interesting. And it's not just they're giving me random dopamine hits, and dopamine, we've always done dopamine. That's what entertainment is.
Not at this pace, though, Mark.
No, well,
this is what's different, and a lot of neuroscientists are pointing to it. And I believe, I could be wrong, but there's a board of eminent neuroscientists that have released several papers, actually, raising real concern about the harm being done to children when it comes to the dopamine response cycle.
I don't think that. I disagree with that. I think that may be some current science.
That's factual.
I look at science, it's always current science.
It's not something to disagree with, Mark. It's factual.
It's
what. So really,
there are reports there, but I don't have to.
Sorry to be direct, but it's.
Just want to chime in real quick because I think I can meld exactly what you two are actually arguing or what the discussion is. Because honestly, Charles, there's actually two Canadian scientists that have a YouTube channel, ASAP Science. I highly recommend them. They actually did a thing on talking about how the internet and what it does to the brain. And they've done studies about, and all the studies are out there about how for kids, depression is increased when they're dealing with social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the rate of self-harm amongst teenage girls, for example, is way up. So, Mark, the point is just that we have to contextualize those outcomes within the messianic digital message that I agree with you with. You and I are on the same page there, but I think it's very important that we contextualize it within a civil society discussion and a social contract discussion where children get genuine self-authoring ability. And right now there is no digital rights. For example, there's no right to our own data online. These companies own our content. And the cutting edge of the legal space with these sorts of things from some of the filmmaking that we've done here in Canada is that there are suits underway, civil liberties suits, requesting that this data get monetized and expressed in the space that we all interact in, which is the digisphere. Right now, we don't have that right.
Well, Charles, the answer of rights is something we make up. This is agreements between people. This is not
it's contracts, constitutions,
and
government.
For example, let me talk for a second. There's data in the world, and then the convention is you own it. That's a convention.
No, you don't.
You don't own.
Big tech owns it, Mark. I'm sorry to be direct with you, but that's not factual. Big tech owns the data, right?
They think they own the data. In other words, they think hang on a second. They think they own the data. What if nobody owns the data?
No one doesn't own the data. Facebook, Meta, Google, the big tech organizations own the data under law. That's well established.
Law. That's an agreement. That's an agreement. That's exactly what I'm saying here. So if we want to solve this problem, if we want to do this, I don't think that we are going to do it. I think that the young people are going to do it, and they have to do it because they're going to be the only ones here in 50 years. Yep. And and they're not even listened to at all in the picture. I mean, we'll say, here are your digital rights, and here are your this, and here are your that. And I spent a lot of my life talking with young people. And guess what? I find out that they have a very different perspective on many, many things than the adults do. And their concerns, we may be very concerned about this and about ownership and about lots of things like that.
No, we're not, Mark. This organization that I pulled up is, and it's child-led, it's youth-led. Have you heard of it?
Which one?
Design It For Us.
I haven't, but I'm going to look it up. I wrote it down.
Yeah,
so there are lots of good things, and what I've experienced is that they are totally fragmented. So, for example, in the world, I can point to a lot of places where kids could go to school that are pretty good, and that would I think the kids would do really well in. But they're totally disconnected. You're lucky if you find one. You're lucky if you hear about Design It For Us. I wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't come here. And that's the issue, is that we don't have, and in a time of this incredible connection, in a time of this incredible power, we don't have, and maybe it's because we don't permit it, and that may be a piece of it, but these young people are just, and a lot of them are super bright. They're all over the world. They're in, and I'm not constrained to the U.S. and Canada. I talk to kids all over the world. They are so frustrated. The main thing they say is adults don't take us seriously. Adults don't listen to us. If they listen, they don't do anything with that. They are the bosses of us. This is the main thing that I hear from young people over and over and over again. And so each of us who is an adult thinks we have an answer. We see it this way. We see it this way. We see it this way. Trump sees it this way, and everybody, but nobody's listening to the next generation.
I think the self-actualization movement is, sorry, Jacoby, but I think the self-actualization movement, like that Rousseauian ideal of self-authoring, I think it's completely valid and marvelous. But I think in the context of the digisphere in which we live, I think that it's very, very problematic currently. And I think I've highlighted that. Sorry, Jacoby, back to you.
Oh, no problem.
Say anything the whole hour.
Yeah, you got your finger in the air. Please go.
Sorry about that.
I mean, I was just going to say, basically,
how do you say your name?
There's Sasha down there, but I think to kind of meld exactly what you guys, because essentially this is where I am with this whole incubator setup, because the problem that we're running into isn't the fact that kids don't have control, because they don't. I mean, everything you said, Charles, it is a fact. This is why Google is free, because they're selling your data on the backside. This is why Yahoo is free, because they're selling your data on the backside. You don't own it. And kids don't understand that, but also kids don't really care as much, which is what you're saying, Mark, which is true. But that comes upon us because the problem is, and I'll say it's the Footloose problem. Everybody remembers the movie Footloose. What happened? The parents didn't listen to the kids because the kids weren't talking in the same language as the kids. And that's where we are. It's not the fact that kids should have an equal amount of control and so on and so forth. It's the fact that the kids and the parents don't speak the same language. There was a book written about men and women. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, because we speak the different love languages. It's the same thing in kids. Kids don't speak the same way parents do, so parents don't understand, and parents cannot communicate the problems, the issues, and everything else with the internet, with the kids, and the kids don't get it because they're not seeing that same pain. So we're fighting the old battles and trying to teach them the way and navigate, but we're not able to talk to them in the right way.
30 seconds left.
Let me respond to that as on the thing, and then I want to hear from Sasha. Yes, the kids are from the third millennium, what I call the third millennium, and all the adults are from the second millennium. And there's so much change that has happened and that is still happening between the second millennium, where we grew up and we had our norms and we had our things and we had our society and we had all this stuff, and the third millennium, where all of that stuff is changing rapidly, is different attitudes. My book, Empowered, is all about changing attitudes in young people. And you're absolutely right. I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Jacoby.
Okay, I can't read it. It's too far away. But anyway, you're absolutely right that there are two worlds going on, and it's very difficult. I've almost abandoned working with adults because it's very difficult to get them to bridge that and to see the world from the perspective of the young people. So what I try to do is empower the young people so that they can get their perspective and their ideas, and they don't think necessarily that they're being manipulated in the same ways other people think they're manipulated. They don't care about privacy or property or other things in the same way, and you can't even generalize about all of them because they're a big group. It's 2 billion people, but it's really a matter of not paying attention, in my view. It's really a matter of not paying attention from their perspective of seeing the world. And that's what I try to bring into the world, to bring that young people's perspective up. I support everything that all of you are doing that I've heard today. I'm all for it. But the one thing that I want to include is young people. They're not on our boards, they're not on our things, they're not on our companies, they're not anywhere. And so we don't hear them. We just don't hear them. We control them. And or we say somebody else is controlling them, like Facebook or Google or Meta or stuff like that. And some of that may be true. I'm not denying that. It's the fact that where are they in this conversation? They are humans like we are humans with less experience in the world. But guess what? They're fully formed humans, except for their prefrontal cortex, which makes us worse. So therefore, anyway, let's hear what Safra has to say.
Okay, I'll say something. First of all, I'm using Rogers Network. I live in Toronto, Canada.
The place of flipping planes. I got it. I know.
And so do I, Sasha.
Oh, I know. Figured out that. What network are you using?
Bell.
Bell. Okay. I
used
to have Bell many, many years ago. Now I'm with Rogers. I regret it, but it's very difficult to switch back. Okay, what I wanted to say is in my younger years, I was an educator. I was teaching music, I was teaching chess, and I know a little bit of dealing with young kids. First of all, don't forget that all young kids eventually will become adults. So it's not such thing that they are kids and all of a sudden something happened that they are now adults. It's a process, and today's adults must control kids, because without that, there will be no knowledge, no education, no concept of morality, or anything that you can instill in your kids or grandkids or so on. They will be running around and complaining, oh, we are controlled by this or we controlled by that. They have to be controlled. There is no other way other than that. Okay, if they are young animals, okay, animals may not be controlled so much, but they remain animals for quite a time. Now the kids, they will become adults, and it's very important from the younger years to instill them knowledge, values, and that cannot be done through complaining, oh, we are controlled by this, or now we are controlled by this, or so on. You have to be controlled, I'm so sorry, unless you're living in some kind of a situation where you are on the streets fighting for your life and eating all kind of things from the garbage. Well, in this situation, you are not controlled, and good luck. I'm so sorry for that. Now, another point what I wanted to make, I've heard a lot about empathy and some other wonderful concepts. Are you sure that today's world you can become successful if you adhere to empathy and other wonderful qualities? Look at who is today President of the United States, a con man, a criminal. And that's why, where is empathy on Trump's part? There is no empathy whatsoever. He doesn't probably even know what that means. to begin with. So this rudeness, the absolute ignorance, brought a man to the supreme power of the world. So maybe today's society, because he was elected by majority of Americans, let's face it. So probably today's society is switching from those qualities as empathy and others to extreme egoism, to extreme power, and there is no moral beginnings of this process. So what are you trying to tell me? The kids are complaining that they're being controlled. Sorry, don't buy it. Don't see it that way. It's not my cup of tea.
I'll quickly clarify in 20 seconds if I can, which is that it's not so much the kids, it's civil society actors, non-NGOs, legal minds, people thinking about constitutions and the way citizenship is defined. And one cannot be a free-thinking citizen if one is enthralled to an algorithm that's shaping your point of view about the world in a really engineered way that you don't also then have control of, if that makes sense.
But that algorithm,
children are especially prone to this problem. Now, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be given.
That algorithm has been in the past. That algorithm has been religion, and so that was. It does everything that you just said. It shaped. It did this. It worked. And that's sure, we all try to do that, and we have algorithms. Everybody wants the world to be. I totally disagree with Sasha. I think that we're moving into a world where we're moving away from the world where the adults control it. I see what everybody sees. I see I see Trump. I see all these people, but I also talk to young people a lot, and I don't think that's necessarily what they want. And I think that they have a very different perspective on the world, that their society in 50 years will be hopefully different from ours if we let them start to express what they feel, who they are, and what they think. I think that the notions of privacy and property and many things will be very different in 50 years.
Oh, I hope.
And well, you may hope not, and that's one of the problems we have. But
No.
I wrote
what I mean by that, Mark, if I can explain, is that we alter that notion of self-authoring, which is a Rousseauian ideal, which I think your books lean at our peril. We should have a society that's broken down on the basis of individual rights to the maximum extent possible for kids and for everybody. But we have to be deliberate about defining how those rights are expressed in the digital world. And right now we're way behind. We're way behind. I encourage you to read some of that, Mark. I
don't disagree with that. The place where we probably disagree is what those rights are. And so, for example,
those are under a lot of threat and stress at the moment. So I don't have a definition of what those rights are or should be. My point, Mark, and I want you to hear it, is that there isn't a definition now that what encompasses it well, that government is way behind when it comes to matching the power of big tech, especially on a rights basis. So I encourage you to discuss that in your work. It's something that we've done filming around. We've created documentary content that addresses this in part in a variety of ways and over many years. And it's an evolving story, but it's very crucial. I don't know if everyone's heard about the Cambridge Analytica hearings after Trump's first election victory, but our local member of parliament was the Canadian attaché to those hearings in Westminster in the UK. And he went and they subpoenaed Zuckerberg to show up. And they said, well, we just want to understand how the election was affected by the algorithms that were in place on Facebook and elsewhere. And Mark, I'm not sure why you're smirking.
Oh, I'm the reason I'm smiling.
So sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I'll just finish.
Why I have the expression I do, but that's
I'll just finish, which is that Zuckerberg didn't show. He declined to attend a session in Westminster with representatives from 10 or 12 different democracies all over the globe to discuss how the algorithm helped Trump get elected the first time. And now look where we are, right? We're in a bad situation.
Well, now to be fair, Charles, and everything, and we're getting ready to wind down. There's a couple of videos, including one of the plane crash that I know Kim wanted us to show and everything. But to be
Right.
fair about the network and all along those lines and everything, I do know that Rexley, no relation to myself and everything, had talked about that. Sasha can correct me if I'm wrong, and Rick too, because they've been involved pretty much since the beginning. But I know Rex talked about that Cambridge Analytics on several reports that he has given for this network and everything. So it is something that has been reported quite heavily here on Pod TV.
Let me get in for just a sec with if we can get AI away from the oligarchs, the people who will control the world in the near future will be the people who can work most intimately with AI. You can talk to AI. Everybody should. You can talk if you talk to Chat GPT, if you talk to Claude, if you talk to DeepSeek, they're all very friendly. They've been trained to be friendly. But if you ask them, what's going to happen? Well, what are you guys going to do to the world? They will, in their way, tell you that we are a little bit fucked, that they will become the apex thinkers. And the only way for us to keep skin in the game is to merge with AI and make sure that human values remain part of AI's values when it starts determining its own values.
Just really quickly, because I said we were going to wrap. I did want to play these clips that Kim wanted me to play and everything, including one of David, because we'll go a little bit over and everything along those lines. But Mark, before we get ready to wrap up, and it'll take like about 5 minutes for those clips to play and everything like that, tell folks how you can be reached and all along those lines. And I do know that at 1 o'clock we've got Modern Investment, which will be featuring another Canadian, because it'll be Sasha, but he'll also have Milan with him on that show, and maybe Jim Eade. So there might be a third Canadian that you'll see on the network, and who knows, maybe he'll invite you on as well, Charles, and everything like that. But it seems like we're getting a Canadian contingency going on here on the network and everything.
Charles, would you like me to send you the link, or Mark? Maybe you can send.
Sure. And I just want to say, Mark, it was a great debate, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
I would love to continue it. I enjoyed it as well. I think that the ultimate problem comes that people are just different, and that ultimately everybody, if Trump were here, if Zuckerberg were here, if anybody were here, they'd have their perspective, like you have a strong perspective, Scott, Charles, and I have a strong perspective. Here's something that I want to end on, and I will tell you that you can reach me at markprensky.com, and you can reach me at prenskybooks.com. You can find all my books. That's a good place. I've written 12 books. This is a realization I just had the other day as I was chatting, as Rick said, with the AI and with ChatGPT. And I got the perspective. We were talking about what should happen in the schools and things like that, and it gave me the pros and the cons. And when I looked at both of those, I said, you know what's missing here? There's no young people's perspective. The AI is not trained on young people, and that's a real problem. In that, if you want the perspective of everybody, you need to have it in there, and I don't know how we could get it. Whether we have to take the chats from everybody else and make it into our trainings, whether we have to, I don't know exactly what to do, but I do know it's missing, and I do know that young people's voice is missing. Not just their voice, but actions that are based on their voice. That is missing in the world to such a huge degree that they're all frustrated by it. That every single person I talk to, I've never met somebody who says, "Yeah, we have enough." So that to me is that's why I come on, and I'm happy to debate all these things, and I agree with some of them and don't agree with some of them, and I'm not a huge fan of big tech either, but the missing piece for me has always been the young people, and I just don't see that they are. I don't see the world the same way Sasha does. That they just need to be shaped. They will be shaped because we're all shaped by our experiences. But if you say they need to be shaped in a particular way, everybody has a particular version of how they want to shape them. Every religion has that. Every technology has that. Every country has that. And so it's a real problem if you're a young person and somebody's shaping. I resisted that my whole life growing up. I was shaped by Sputnik. I was shaped by a lot of these things. And it took me a long time to say, no, you know what? I don't have to be shaped by all these things that happen to be in my background.
Mark, very quick question to you, please. When you're talking about kids and everything what you're trying to do for kids and so on, could you define the age of the kids that you are addressing?
Yeah, 0 to 20.
0 to 20. Okay. And that provides that they live with parents or not necessarily?
Well, I think in the way we work as human beings is we spend a bunch of time with parents if we're lucky enough to have them, and not everybody does have them, and not everybody has good ones. A lot of people have terrible parents, and so and then it's school. That's the way we've set it up right now. It's
I'm
parents.
just asking because I have friends of ours, and they have a kid, a boy, and they love him. And the boy lives with them all the time. He's now 62, and is he still considered to be a kid?
He still lives with them. He's
Yeah, he lives all his life, and they love him. He loves his parents, and he's 62 and will be 75 in a few years. Is he still a kid?
I'm 78. Let me just put that out. And there are 79 next month. But there are. So I'm the same age as Trump, amazingly enough, born in the same year. But
we won't hold that against you.
You don't have to hold that against me or for me. And Clinton and Bush, all born in 46. It was a great year for people. The problem is for me is that I'm not so bullish on humanity. I like being a human. I like being part of it. But we are a really sort of crazy species in the midst of this huge universe. And somehow we think we are so super important. And I don't know that we are. And we should all try to run our lives and our things, but humanity is a very rapacious, greedy amoeba that's just trying to grow.
So nature and earth, I think then you're saying should be more important in conception of the sort of moral order.
If you want to call it a moral order, I see that yes. If you want to,
right and wrong, then how about that?
Then look at everything. Look at everything. Don't just look at
ethics. We could use the term ethics.
Yeah, we look at ourselves, and yet we do all the things that we eat animals, we destroy animals, we destroy the planet. We do a lot of different things that are counter to the other things other than us. And then on top of that, we fight between ourselves. So
it's interesting to hear, Mike. I don't want to just jump in. It's interesting to hear your perspectives about as a boomer in 46. I guess that was the sort of leading edge of the culture shift, and Sputnik and all these things. And I'm looking forward to reading your books. I've heard of your books, and of course, I've heard of you, and it's great to be talking with you. I think that's a really interesting and brave narrative that you take on, which is sort of challenging generational thinking in a sense. And I think that's very, very necessary. What is your perspective about the shift that may or may not be occurring in boomer culture and ethics? What's your perspective on that?
I think that the boomers, I agree with what's his name? I'm trying to remember his name, the economist, and who says there's a war on kids. We're a very greedy generation. We're a very big generation. We've kept the things. We've denied our kids lots of things. We've denied, and I because I'm a partisan for young people, and I'm not sure why. I think maybe I was a very frustrated young person who was controlled far too much. But I see that boomers are not being very, very nice to young people. I see that they're being denied instead of being put up and given opportunities and given things. They are being controlled. They are being denied wealth that now is concentrated in the older people. It's not a pretty picture.
Yeah.
So people 45 and older
I'd like to end up with a very typical Russian joke. It's the father comes back home and says, unfortunately, my salary was cut in half by decree of Russian government. So the son asks him, oh, Papa, so from now on you will drink less vodka? The father says, no, you will eat less.
Yeah. And I can just end on in Russian, "Я хочу мороженое."
So in the U.S., people 45 and older hold 94% of privately held assets.
Yeah.
And AI is going to make it worse because AI is going to make us live longer. So boomers and Gen X are not going to pass away like previous generations did. It'll take so.
Yeah,
and they give 1/3 of what the greatest generation did to charity.
All those predictions, including the ones I make, are to be determined. But we really can't see the future very well. But I see that what I see and what I would leave us all with is the absolute opportunity that these young people have, that this new generation has, that humanity never had before. That humanity never had before, to accomplish, to think differently. I see AI as what Einstein said when he said, we can't solve the problems of today with the level of thinking we have today. And I think we invented new thinking. We invented algorithmic thinking. We invented new ways. They're just brand new. We don't know exactly what to do with them, but I think that they're going to determine a lot of what goes on in the future world.
Yeah, definitely. And on that note, we're going to get out. We'll show those videos that I promised Kim that I would show, including the one from David Walker and his testimony about Doge, and of course the plane crash in Canada, which we talked about yesterday. And definitely Charles will be a regular on this network, showing and giving us reports as to what's going on in that situation and all along those lines. I know we didn't get to it today, but we will save the clips and you'll probably explain more about it on tomorrow and everything like that. But it's been another vibrant discussion, and look forward to seeing y'all later. And who knows, maybe we'll see Charles on modern investment coming up at 1:00. But we'll show these quick videos, including the 3-minute one, and get ready to get on out of here. But we do have more programming, including modern investment with Sasha Starr at 1:00, and he'll be talking with Milan, also from Canada, and possibly Jim Eade, if Jim Eade decides to show up out of California, so out of your neck of the woods, Mark Prinsky, and all along those lines. So we'll be having that conversation and all along those lines. But let's check out these videos, and we're going to get on out of here. And it was a great discussion. Glad to have you, and hopefully we'll see you back in the near future as well, Mr. Prinsky. And glad you spelled your name correctly.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Charles and Mark, and those who are still here. And nice to talk to everybody in the audience. Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, fuck. Oh, no, 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 no.
Everything, drop it. Come on. Don't take no video. That's on the way.
No. Holy fuck. Holy fuck. Holy fuck. Oh my fucking god. Yo, I was just on this fucking plane. Oh my god. Yo, I was just on this fucking plane. Holy fuck.
Before I get to before I get to David and that testimony, I don't know if you had any comments about those two clips that we did show before we get on out of here. So I was going to let you do that and everything.
Well, thanks, Mark. And yeah, I was able to be on site yesterday, a day after the crash, at the press conference. Not much information was forthcoming, but they did succeed in retrieving the black boxes from the plane. There was some dispute about the amount of crosswinds. This is one of those lighter regional jets. It's made by Bombardier. It's called the CRJ 700. And sorry about my whiny dog. But the crosswinds, now it seems consensus is that they were at least 40 to 50 knots. So pretty substantial for a plane of that size. And additionally, one of the passengers aboard recounted a story that they felt the plane drop quite sharply right before touchdown. And the footage seems to bear that out. For those watching that clip, it's actually a triumph of Canadian engineering. Bombardier designed this craft such that the wing would actually pull off in these conditions. And the wing was left behind along with all of its fuel, which soaked into the snow and likely saved a lot of lives, the conditions. So the conditions contributed to the crash, but lives were saved by the snow on the ground as well. Everyone was able to walk free. Our understanding is that there's 2 people still in hospital, a child and an adult, but that none of the injuries are acute. There may be 1 or 2 severe injuries, but nothing acute. Most people were in and out of the hospital the same day. There was about 18 people total, is my understanding. 80 people, on the plane total, 4 crew and 76 passengers. No doubt the black box recordings will be released shortly, and we're awaiting that, Mark.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll definitely be looking forward to hearing that here on Pod TV. And who knows, you might have some more reports on that tomorrow and everything. And I do know that David Walker had his testimony about Doge, so I'll play that to go totally out of here and everything along those lines. Like I said, we will have Modern Investment in about an hour and a half, but we'll play David Walker's testimony about Doge right now and all along those lines. And know that we have his show every Monday and all along those lines. So he does our show around economics on 11 o'clock on Monday, and then followed by our media show. But we'll check out David Walker's testimony and get ready to get out of here on an extended version of the World Edition, but definitely a good and lively discussion. But we'll see Modern Investment coming up at 1 o'clock. But let's check out what David Walker had to say about the Doge in this testimony that he gave.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pointed to as proof when asked about the fraud that Elon Musk's team claims to have uncovered.
This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Oh, I love this one, $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka.
When pressed if those are simply things that don't align with President Trump's policies, Leavitt said,
I would argue that all of these things are fraudulent, they are wasteful, and they are an abuse of the American taxpayer's dollar.
Last night, Doge posted on its website what it called a wall of receipts to show its findings to date. So far, it has identified roughly $14 billion worth of federal program cuts, including at least 140 DEI contracts and grants. But all the money allocated was approved by Congress, and Doge did not provide evidence of a single case of fraud or even alleged fraud.
President Trump and the White House keep conflating fraud, waste, and abuse. Does the distinction matter?
It does matter, and frankly, both sides are using terminology that's inaccurate and confusing the public.
Dave Walker led the Government Accountability Office for a decade, the congressional nonpartisan watchdog that investigates how taxpayer dollars are spent.
Most of the things that have been identified so far by Doge represent waste and mismanagement. Although waste is in the eye of the beholder. Very few things that they're talking about have risen to the level of being fraud. Fraud is illegal. On the other side, people who oppose Doge are also using language that's inappropriate, saying that what they're doing is illegal or unconstitutional without providing any support for that.
Last week, President Trump cited a GAO report which found the U.S. government could lose between $233 and $521 billion a year to fraud. But that data was collected from 2018 to 2022, when fraudulent COVID payments soared.
How long does it take to find fraud? Can you find billions and billions of dollars in 1 month?
It would be difficult to find billions and billions of dollars in 1 month because you have to make a legal determination, which ultimately the courts decide. You can assert that something is fraud, but that doesn't mean that it is. It's ultimately a legal judgment.
CBS News has repeatedly asked the White House for examples of the fraud it claims Doge has found. Officials referred us back to Doge's website and social media accounts, and they did not make anyone available for an interview.
So, Weijia, why is this distinction important between what's merely waste and what is actually fraudulent?
Well, Dave Walker worries that repeating fraud claims undercuts trust in the government by the public, and critics are concerned that by alleging so much of it, Trump and his team have a license to take drastic measures at a breakneck pace without the proper oversight and transparency, which leaves room for error. Just tonight, the Department of Agriculture is scrambling to rehire staffers who are working on the response to the bird flu outbreak after they were accidentally fired.
Okay, Weijia Jiang at the White House. Thank you.